grab a pen and paper, a glass of water, and settle in. Because today on the Blueprint Podcast, we're going back to the beginning. I'm interviewing marketing strategist Morgan Banks from Strategically Social. And if you've been grinding in your business and feel discouraged, today's episode is going to give you fun stuff. We're talking marketing with a biblical twist, how to unlock wisdom from the book of Genesis to change how you look at business and life, and how to stop comparing yourself to others. It all starts in the garden. Let's go. Well, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, Morgan. Super excited to have you.
I'm really excited to be here.
Have you been on a podcast before?
I have actually, and I actually have hosted a podcast before too.
Okay, love it.
Yeah, so I'm excited to actually be on the other side.
On the side, I love that. Okay, so we met to plan this episode. We met at Eating Coffee Shop, and we were talking, and I was like, Morgan, I want to talk about marketing from a biblical perspective.
Correct.
And I'm going to look at my notes here because I like what you said was so good. You said it starts with the garden.
For sure.
And before you can market effectively, you need to understand what stage of business or soil you are.
Yes.
And I loved that parallel between your business and soil and gardening. And I think that's kind of the current branding you're going on for your Strategically Social event that you have coming up. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the 3 stages of a Christian entrepreneur and how that relates to soil. So like for our audience, kind of tell us, like give them a snapshot into our conversation about being the soil, the garden, and how marketing, all that things wrapped up in that.
Yeah. So I guess like as a premise, just to get our audience kind of warm with me, Strategically Social was originally birthed out of me really trying to help my clients as a marketing agency owner. I noticed that most of them had a lot of issues with really trying to figure out where they were. They were dealing with a lot of, okay, I know that I want to reach this mass audience, but I'm not really sure, number one, where I stand. And I have so many ideas, and I am kind of in a place of permanency in a sense, like I'm established. I have a restaurant. I have everything going. I did the LLC, but I still don't really know how to grab my people. And so with Strategically Social, I realized like I needed to like bring entrepreneurs together, connect them so that they can get together. And I realized that every entrepreneur needs a community regardless, right? And so what I wanted to do was I said, well, first we got to assess something because in my opinion, it all starts in the garden. And so that's what I told you when we were sitting down at Eden, which was a perfect place, by the way.
So many plants and stuff.
So many plants. We were already in the space and feel. And when I looked at these different types of entrepreneurs, right? I look at the different type of soil that they could be. When I realized as I was looking at the entrepreneurs, I was talking to so many entrepreneurs who were either floating by the seat of their pants, standing clear and firm on who they were, or they were seated, but may have been seated in the wrong place. And so those are the 3 things that I have noticed that every Christian entrepreneur usually finds themselves traveling between because they are either floating by the seat of their pants. They have so many questions. They have no idea what they're going to do or where they are at all. And then you have that one who's standing and they're very firm on what they're supposed to do, but they waver. They find themselves kind of being back and forth. And maybe they have that bit of an issue with consistency because they can't stand and stand still. And then you have the people who are seated, but they may be seated in the wrong garden. So how does somebody know what type of soil they are? Because when you were talking about it, I kind of saw myself in a little bit of all of it. And I was like, wait, which one am I? Right. So like, which, like, how do you help people kind of define? Cause I think it's so important to understand what kind of soil you're in, right? Because then that determines the moves you need to make, right? To either move to the next, soil or understand like how to be in the soil you're in, right? Cause it's not necessarily a negative thing, which one you're in. So how do you help people kind of find out which one they are? Yeah. So speaking with so many different entrepreneurs and helping them with their brands, as we were developing things like just natural social media engagement, I realized that, okay, in order for us to be able to get these people, this audience on board with this message that we're trying to translate over to them, you guys as the owner, right, the entrepreneur, you must know the soil you're in. And so to answer the question, I believe that the way for us to really be able to understand and know is we have to know what's in our garden, right? In Genesis, you have right before, God puts Adam into the garden, he said that he has this one river that flows, and then it flows into 4 different parts. And then he starts putting plants and all of the amazing things in the garden, including animals and all that, right? But Adam had to first know what was present in his garden. So I believe that we know what our soil is when we know what grows from our soil. You would only be able to know what's in your soil when you're able to stand there and say, okay, cucumbers grow here, strawberries grow here, roses grow here, right? But the only way you're able to know it is that you actually stand and assess it, right? Which goes back to our issues. If we're floating by the seat of our pants and we don't really know where we are, we don't take enough time to assess the soil. If we're standing in that soil and we're like, okay, I get it, I see it, but we don't move around enough in it. We don't go and assess the areas, the perimeters. We don't know what grows on the outside, the inside, what tries to attack the garden. We don't know. If we're seated and we're only ever seated and we don't get up and walk the garden, or we don't, or we go sit in other people's gardens, then we have an issue of being able to assess what's in front of us.
Yeah. And I love what you said, like looking at other people's gardens. Yeah. I think that was something, as we were talking, I felt convicted about. And sometimes I look at other people's business models or other people's content, everything, and I'm trying to do what they're trying. I'm like, oh, I want to do what that person's doing, right? And like I've hired coaches before to help me with my business or my marketing, and I found myself trying to be like them, right? And as a matter of fact, I spent a ton of money last year on a coach, and the Lord told me about halfway through, was like, you don't need this person. Wow. And I think I never needed them. And I just was like, I was trying to build somebody else's garden, and I didn't even ask the Lord, like, hey, do I need this person? And I realized like the person I was trying to become using their model wasn't who I was supposed to be. That wasn't the garden I was supposed to have, right? Yeah. Or we look at social media and compare ourselves. Oh, well, that person has more engagement. That person has more followers. Like, what can I do? What can I do to be more like them? Or I feel bad about my garden because I'm not like them, right? And so it's like these things that kind of distract us. So talk about some of the more of those problems that sneak into our garden, right? Because we know in the Garden of Eden, there was some other people in the garden too that was causing some problems. So like, what are some ways that we can help, that we can identify problems that might be in our garden if we're feeling stuck or feeling like something's not happening? Like maybe there are some things that are hindering our, garden and making our garden sick.
Yeah. And I love when we talked about this, because I think it kind of just flowed out, because what studying scripture, and you see how once Adam is now in this place, God brings these animals to Adam. He gives him the first command he gives Adam is to wait and watch. Those are the first two commands that he gives Adam. He does not tell him, go and run and have a good old time. And I think when we get in entrepreneurship, that's what we do. And I would dare to say that Adam is literally like the first entrepreneur, right? That we've ever seen, ever. Because as he's standing there, he's given this plot of land that he has to now learn how to manage that he's never been in before. But the beautiful thing about it is, if you look at Adam and you see where he was created from, he's created from the dust of the earth, right? If he's created from the dust of the earth and God breathed into him, then he has a God-like nature. He's created in the image of God. So now he has the ability and the intellectual ability to move and create as God, because he's the seed of God. Okay. He's the breath of God.
Okay. Preach.
But what we do, come on. But what we do is we have this issue in entrepreneurship when we do what you were talking about, which is we look at what someone else is doing and we get confused with the breath that God breathed on them and not the breath God breathed into us. If God breathed into me, yes, we're created in his image, but what he gave Adam was something specific. I would dare to say that he was literally like the first environmentalist, the first botanist, the first person to be able to literally touch and be able to, a biologist, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. He's like the first biologist. Right. And he has the ability to assess this garden, his ability to look at this garden. And then as he's looking at it, he has to take the first command God gives him, which is wait and watch. What we do in entrepreneurship is we go and we just watch. We go into the garden, we look, and we're like, wow, God said that I was going to be a book coach, or I'm going to write a book. And I go look at every other Christian entrepreneur who's doing a book. And now I start feeling like there's something with God wrong with what God gave me. Right. I feel like, okay, what he gave me is not as good as the next person. And, I'm comparing now the fact that in their garden, they're growing roses and lemons. And I'm upset that God only gave me peanuts, or I'm upset that God only gave me, this remedial flower that I don't think looks as beautiful as theirs. And so I think that comparison begins to strip us of the ability to see the creative nature God gave us. God presents all of these animals to Adam and says, now name it. That's the next issue we have. Yeah. When God presents us this vision, he presents us this blueprint, right? This business model that is really honestly genius.
Yeah.
But we look at it, we go and then look at someone else's garden and say, well, this one needs to be switched because the industry won't like this. It's not necessarily trending.
Yeah.
I don't think it will fit. Right. So we start to change what God has already known. The reason why he came and said, hey, name this is because he knows that it's in you to name it. We forget to go through the naming stage. We allow it to come and then we say, okay, well, let me go and figure out what to name it based on what the industry says I should name it.
Wow. So that's like even talking about branding, right? How you brand something. So spiritual branding, being able to name things, understanding the identity of what it is and how the name reveals itself in that.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that you said it as if when we're doubting something, because that's what the snake made Eve do, is doubt what a God had already said, what God already put into her. And so I think that's just a really interesting parallel, right, into what's actually happening in our businesses. So something else you said was you talked about the apostolic grace, and this desire to create a new colony, right? This desire to expand that every Christian entrepreneur has. I think that's part of the way God is expanding the kingdom, is activating us to go into a marketplace and create a new idea, or move into a new city and start a business, or plant a church, right? So talk about that apostolic grace and how that might actually be a snake for some people.
Yeah, that was good how you prepared that. What I love about the apostolic grace is that I do truly believe that many entrepreneurs possess this grace, because apostle in itself means a way I send. So a lot of us are sent into this industry, into our garden. No matter what service or product you're in, you're sent into a place in the market that now you have to influence and you have to bring an answer to some sort of problem. When you're sent now to this place, you're in a place where you have the apostolic grace to bring people into a colonization that they may not have known before. Biblically, there were so many apostles that were sent into different cities to now bring these cities into a knowing of the kingdom of heaven. They did not understand the kingdom of heaven, or may have in some ways rejected the kingdom of heaven. So they came to now bring a state of establishment and principle to these places. And I believe that's what we are given when we are going into these gardens. God puts the apostolic grace on the entrepreneur, as a Christian entrepreneur, right? To go into these places and to say, now establish what is already done in heaven. I need you to take what's in heaven, put it here in the market so that I have space and a place to move. And that means that we begin to start a new colony of people. That's what Strategically Social is literally doing with our ability to connect all these entrepreneurs, is because we're establishing a colony and, in a sense, a district in the kingdom and in the marketplace that says, God can establish what he has established in heaven here. But I feel like when a lot of entrepreneurs have this issue with the apostolic grace, sometimes they know how to build well, but when they see this vision, they get so caught up in the vision, they get so caught up in the things that they are given to build, that they forget that they have multiple responsibilities. And we see that with Adam in the garden, because he has now two responsibilities, right? He has to tend and watch his garden, but now he's been given a gift, which is the woman out of his rib. Now that you've been given this gift of a woman, you now have to know how to lead both. Which is an apostle has the ability to ground the people and keep them in a sense in alignment, right? And so they get to feed you the vision of God, but they get to still build and go. But I believe that Adam kind of ran into an issue, and this is where a lot of entrepreneurs run into, is once they're given that partner, once they're given that person that they can run that vision with, they forget they're still responsible for the totality of it. Though you can delegate a task, you can delegate a responsibility, Adam is still responsible to lead his wife and to also lead the garden, right? But he kind of, sort of, honestly, in the way I interpret it by scripture, is that he neglects fully taking on the responsibility of the garden, and he focused more on the woman. And so his gift kind of foreshadowed and blinded him from his original work. Okay. Wow. And I think in entrepreneurship that happens, we want the work, we want the team, but then the team blinds us from the original vision. Yeah. One thing that, the apostolic calling in my life that I really related to when you said that was being able to establish a colony and understand. I love that imagery with that. The thing that I've struggled with is God's given me the vision,
And I sometimes get frustrated with the Lord because I'm not seeing the vision as he gave it to me in the current state.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's
I
like,
think
Lord,
that's
you told me I was
everybody's
going to do this. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
looking at my life and I don't see none
I
of what
don't
you
see
told
it.
me.
Yeah.
So then I start to doubt, well, did God really say that? Right. Or is this really what it is? Or maybe I'm supposed to switch it. You know what I mean? So that's where it's been a struggle for me, is being able to be grounded and work the process and to wait until it actually becomes a thing. And it's hard to wait when you know it's in you. When I look at other people, I'm like, I said the exact same thing Myron Golden said, right? and I'm like, how is he doing what he's doing? I said the exact same thing, right? Like, God told me that too, right? And so it's kind of those things where I'll be wrestling with that, right?
Wow.
So like, I mean, talk about that waiting and how to balance growth. Because I think what I hear you saying is like, you have to stretch yourself to be able to handle a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So in that stretching, waiting thing, when you don't see it, and I think that's why a lot of times we feel stuck, right? How do we know where we're at, right? Bringing it back to, again, the soil. Like, how do I know when it's time to transition to a different soil? How do I know to stay in the soil I'm in? Like, how do you know the timing to move?
That's so good. So I honestly think that we have an ability to, first we need to look at, like you said, we're looking at the soil, we're paying attention to what we have in front of us, but we really have the ability to look at the details that Adam has. The scriptures, First Corinthians 2, I believe, 1 Corinthians 2 or 1 Corinthians 3, where it says that one plants, one waters, and God does the increase. And I think that when we're in that season of capacity stretching, when we're in the process of the waiting, God being a gardener and being so beautiful in all he does not give us the time period from where he planted the seeds and the animals to when Adam appeared. We don't know the time. We just know the story. So when he put these plants in the east of Eden and he put them there, we don't know how long it took for all those plants to grow, for the ground to be ready for Adam to come up. We just know that was the alignment of the story. It didn't say that in 5 days, that's exactly when Adam came out of the ground, right? It was a process. And I think that's what God shows us even in 1 Corinthians. Someone can plant a seed, but they may not be able to water it. So the vision will start. The seed has been laid, but now you're in between the process of the seed and the water. Now you got the seed and now you're waiting for the water. And once the water comes, it says that God does the increase. So it will increase over time. And in that time in between, we're stretched. We have an ability to come into more capacity, because think about it. Sometimes the visions that we see are so big. They're so much bigger than what we really can currently handle at this time period. You know, we want to get there so fast, but what we don't realize is we're still in seed form. We don't realize is we're still in water form. Water takes time to get into the roots. And honestly, a lot of times, if you know, if you ever had flowers, or if you bought flowers for your wife, you're like, if that was a really good batch of flowers, you want her to water that thing, right? You want her to take care of them, because you're like, I spent a few dollars on that, babe. I need you to make sure that thing is, still growing. I believe that God allows many people in our process of waiting to water it. Keep coming and watering the seed he gave us. And I think we take for granted the season of watering. Right? We take for granted the time where he just says, all I need you to do is water it. So somebody comes to you and they're like, man, I really see you're going to have this huge podcast. You're going to be speaking to all of these amazing people. And I mean, people are it's going to blow up. You're going to have your own studio. You're going to have this. So you're mad because in 3 weeks, you don't got no investor. You don't got no building. You're wondering, how can I pay for these products? Like all of that. When really the process is he's going to send another person to confirm it. Then he's going to send another person that's going to say, hey, I want to introduce you to a person that I want to come on your podcast. And you're like, okay. And for you, it's like, this is long and drawn out. I just want to get to the end. But it's the watering of someone continuing to water the vision until one day you look up and your garden is full of animals. Your garden is full of life. And you have a tree of good. You have a tree, you just see that. You wake up and it's all these things sitting around you. Right? So but good. It's a seed, water, and increase time.
Okay, so I think this is a great opportunity to talk about your event coming up, because this is an event where you can get watered. Right? I love if you've been in the garden and it's hot and you sweating, especially if you're in Houston, you know the heat's coming down. I know some of us are feeling the heat in our business. That part. And your seed is drying up and you're like, yo, I need some water. I gotta get through this thing, right? So I think your event is gonna be empowering. So talk about talk about it. Say the name and then talk about, what it is.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Strategically Social Garden Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I literally wanted, honestly, I had this vision. This is the premise of it. I had a vision when I was in prayer, and the Lord kept saying over and over again in this vision, he said, bring the people back to the garden. Mm-hmm. He just kept saying, bring them back to the garden. And I was like, okay, Lord, well, what does that look like? How do I produce that? Should I really do a whole big conference or summit? And I didn't feel like he was specifically talking just to Christians, but I knew that he was talking to entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, what would that live like? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, we really need to have a conversation. And so the way that came about is we were like, okay, what should we call it? Garden talk, or should we call it garden conversation? Yeah. And we were like, well, let's just have a conversation, because the Lord said, I want to meet my sons and daughters in the middle of where they are. Mm-hmm. Because right now they're at a place where they're in a sense of a drought. Right. Mm-hmm. Because I haven't had an idea for a while. I'm kind of stuck with where to go. I've worked with companies before to help me on my business or my brand, but I'm not really sure that they're really taking it to the place that I want it to be. Maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't have a community specifically to talk about this issue with. Mm-hmm. And so the Lord is like, I want to meet them in the middle. Wow. So we decided with this event, we want to place this stage in the middle of the room, put the garden right there in the middle, and have them enter the garden through this conversation. And so we're going to have some amazing panelists who also have businesses that are based on biblical principle, who are going to come and teach. And one of the cool parts about Strategically Social is our interactive games. That is what sets us apart from every other networking experience. We have interactive games that will activate people into the flow of whatever we're teaching. Yeah. And so my goal in this event is to activate the entrepreneur's garden experience again, that we can bring that entrepreneur back to the garden and say, hey, you may have been banished in other seasons because of different decisions where the snake may have gotten you out of place, or you got out of place because you compared things that were in other people's garden. But God wants to activate you and replace you back into the garden, because through Jesus we've gotten that, right? We've gotten access to it again. So I believe that is what God is trying to do with this event, and I believe every panelist is going to add to it. We have a panel discussion, we have the games and activation, and then we have a fireside chat with two amazing co-pastors of Eden Church. And they're going to give us some lessons from the garden. Eden, literally, it worked out.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love that. Okay, super excited for that event coming up May 26th.
May 25th.
May 25th.
May 25th from 12 to 4. It's going to be at CC Network. All of the event details on Eventbrite, as well as on our Instagram socials, which is,
and we'll have that in the description as well, so you can click on that. Yes. So, and then if you're watching this after May 25th and you still want to get some more connected, we'll have her information in the bio so you can get connected with her. Strategically Social. So I said in the intro, we're going to talk about marketing with a biblical twist, right? So to kind of wrap this up, let's talk about biblical marketing. Let's talk about marketing in the garden. How does that work?
I love it. So I would say when it comes down to biblical marketing, you want to look at knowing your market, right? Knowing who to speak to, and knowing, are you talking to Adam or are you talking to Eve? They have two different problems. Adam has a problem of leading. Eve has a problem of listening. And Eve has a problem of discernment, really, right? And her issue is being able to see that something is being presented, but having the discernment to say, that's not exactly what he said. So you're kind of twisting his words now, right? And I believe that when it comes down to marketing, biblical marketing is simple. Know your market. If in your garden, you know that it's been commanded that you're going to sell lemons, then when someone comes telling you, well, he surely didn't say you should sell lemons, you should really be selling oranges. Well, oranges don't grow here. If I don't know that oranges don't grow here, I'm going to start trying to sell oranges, and then I'm upset because my cash flow is low. I'm upset because no one is biting any of my marketing research that I did with looking at someone else's garden. And now when they get to me, people are upset because they notice, hey, I came to you for oranges and you said you would provide oranges. And I'm not receiving oranges. This feels like lemons. Because people can see what you're really called to, even if you can't see it. They will come. People in the market, they'll come to you and they'll say, well, it just seems like you're more fit for this. And then we get upset and we're like, no, because I want to go in this direction, but we're only going in that direction because the market told us to do it.
Wow.
Because the trends told us to do it, but not because we know that actually grows here. Okay. So someone's upset because you're a little sour. Well, I was meant to be sour. I'm growing lemons. But that's not their fault that you started trying to sell oranges.
Okay. So you got to be self-aware and I really understand your product, know the problem that you solve, and kind of match yourself with that problem.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that if you know who you're speaking to, if you're teaching about certain principles and you want Adam to catch it, speak Adam's language.
Yeah. You know, something that was interesting to me in our conversation is you said, market what you know, not what you see.
Yeah.
And I think that's so people who are in the floating stage, right? When you're in the beginning of your business and you're trying to learn, it's hard to necessarily kind of know that answer, to know what garden you are and know the problem, because you're just starting out. You're kind of you're getting your feet wet, right? So not everyone just knows that answer starting off, right? So you kind of need some time to kind of mature. So how do you market yourself when you're still figuring out what your offer is and you're still figuring out like, who am I and who I'm trying to attract to? How do you go about that?
I love this question because for me, marketing what I know has to do with what is the vision God gave me. You talked about that before where you said, okay, I know that I have this vision, but I feel like I haven't gotten there. And then it's like all these things in between. Before any entrepreneur jumps into their industry, they know the vision. That's the one thing that's the only thing they have. I know that I'm good at designing graphics. I know that I am good at selling stuff. So I'm a salesman, right? I know that. Right. I think you want to market what you know, not what you see, because you may see that Myron Golden is good at marketing with biblical perspective. But if you know how to market based on amateur cartoons or you know how to market and you know how to talk a language of fruit like this, talk what you know, market what you know. Speak on and bring people into what you know. If you know that that's where you are, then I believe that's what we should market and not what you're seeing the market do. Because again, we market the trends a lot, but then once that trend is gone, how do we know that that is what you can produce, right? Especially for my service providers. Really big key for service providers. If you're offering a service, you want to know what distinguishes your service from anybody else's service, because there are so many tax preparers, right? But how, with a tax preparer, if I'm coming to you, what makes your service just completely different that even if I ran into somebody that had the best pitch, I'm so in love with the process that my current tax provider gives me that it's so hard to go with another preparer because I know what that person offers me. Right. And so, yeah, I see that other people are giving away $6,500 cash advances. People are giving away cars if you come with them. Like, I don't need that, right? What I need is someone who knows how to prepare me for wealth. Yeah. And I know that that is that person that I have, that I know that that person can bring me to that. And I think when we know what's in us, even if that grows over time, because remember, he doesn't increase. So if you know that you have an ability to bring people to your tax business because you know how to prepare them for wealth, then I would always market from that. Wow. I am your tax preparer that allows you to be prepared for wealth, that I will make sure that everything in is alignment. So that way, when you get to your millions and your billions, you're not going to backtrack from other years. Wow. That's completely different than you telling me that I want a car. Yeah. I don't need a car. I got a car. Right? That's different. Yeah. And I think when we market from the thing that is innate in us, that breath that God gave us, that's when we're able to have a momentum that can't be stopped.
Yeah, I love that. You know, and I think you're kind of reading my mail here, because like that was like the season I'm in right now where I felt like I transparently tried to be the marketing guru the last 2 years. And I knew what I was talking about, but I was trying to occupy a space that I saw other people doing. I got to educate in this certain way. I got to do this certain thing. Yeah. And ultimately what that did was that took me away from, and I could always sense it. I kept being like, ugh, this isn't it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so I came back to it and I was like, you know, like, what is it that is innate to me? What has God breathed into me? Right? Yeah. And it's like storytelling and like being a journalist and understanding people's business. I mean, like, I call it gold mining, being able to go and like gold and find the gold in other people's stories and businesses, and then bring it out and show it to everybody. Right. Like all of my clients, like I just find the best part of their business model. And then I help them like leverage that thing. Right. Like I'm innately a community builder. Right. Been building community since I was in church youth group. Right. Like I went to a new school and built up our youth group right there after that school. Right. So I've been doing that thing since I was like 13 years old. Right. So community building, storytelling, you know, content, you know, so now here we go. We're doing a podcast, right? And this feels like the thing that I'm like, okay, this is the thing that gives me the most joy and the most fun to grow with. And I feel like I can plant in this garden, right?
I feel like
You know what I mean? Like, I was like, the marketing guru is great. I want to
Yeah.
still do marketing. I still want to help people with marketing, but really this is what it is. So
This
now
is
I
what
can
it
do a
is.
little bit. Now I can do both. Now I can help people with their marketing, but it's planted in this garden. All right, guys. So get plugged into the community, find ways to water your garden. The link to the Strategically Social event will be in the description. Follow Morgan, check out what she has going on. This is your opportunity to continue to build the thing that God has given you. And I'm really excited to be a part of your journey and hope that as you're watching this, that you were empowered, encouraged, and inspired to continue on the journey, listening to what God originally told you. Continue to build that thing. And we'll see you guys in the next video.